Hello, everyone. Welcome to Daily Storyteller. Today, I'm here to help you sleep. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching. Lay back comfortably, relax, and let's begin. The year was 2014, a crisp October evening when the air seemed to whisper secrets through the falling leaves. A group of 4 friends, Emma, Mike, Rachel, and Chris, had decided to escape the chaos of city life. They rented a cabin deep within the secluded woods of Vermont. It wasn't the first time they ventured into the wilderness, but there was something about this particular trip that felt different. The cabin stood old and isolated, surrounded by dense trees that seemed to lean closer with every passing hour. The plan was simple: 3 days of hiking, campfires, and catching up with no distractions. Yet, as they arrived at the cabin and the sun dipped below the horizon, a peculiar heaviness settled in the air. Emma, the planner of the group, laughed it off. "Just your imagination," she teased, but deep down, everyone felt it. Part 1. Emma was the type to always take charge. A 30-year-old architect, her sharp mind and detail-oriented nature made her the unofficial leader. She had been the one to book the cabin after hours of meticulous research, or so she thought. Mike, Emma's boyfriend, was her opposite. Carefree and adventurous, his laid-back demeanor was both endearing and infuriating. A journalist by profession, he loved chasing a good story, though this time he promised no work, just us. Rachel, Emma's childhood friend, was quieter. A teacher with a heart for books and nature, she saw this trip as a chance to recharge, yet she couldn't shake the unease she felt as they drove further into the woods. Finally, Chris, Mike's best friend, was the wild card. A software developer with a knack for mischief, he treated life as a game. But even his usual jokes fell flat as they unloaded their bags, the looming cabin casting long shadows. As night fell, the group settled in. The fireplace crackled, casting warm light on the aged wooden walls. They laughed, shared stories, and toasted marshmallows, unaware that something outside watched. The first sign came the next morning. Mike had woken early to fetch firewood. He returned pale, holding a small, intricately carved figurine, a wooden totem of a twisted face, its eyes hollow and haunting. "Found this near the tree line," he said, placing it on the table. "Probably just a creepy art project." Rachel stared at it uneasily. "Why would anyone leave that here?" "Maybe it's a prank," Chris suggested, though his voice wavered. Emma brushed it off, urging everyone to focus on breakfast and the hike ahead, but the day felt wrong. The woods seemed unnaturally quiet, the usual symphony of birds and rustling leaves replaced by an oppressive silence. Chris swore he saw movement between the trees, but when they looked, there was nothing there. Back at the cabin that evening, tensions were high. The group tried to laugh it off, but the unease lingered. As they prepared for bed, a loud thud echoed from below. Mike grabbed a flashlight and led the way to the basement. There they found the source. A heavy wooden chest had tipped over. The contents spilled across the floor: old books, yellowed papers, and another totem, larger and more grotesque than the first. Emma knelt, picking up one of the books. It was handwritten, filled with symbols and notes in a language none of them recognized. One page, however, was in English. "Do not stay after dark." "This is ridiculous," Chris said, forcing a laugh. "It's just a scare tactic." But the fear in his eyes betrayed his words. They hurried back upstairs, locking the basement door behind them. The night dragged on, each sound outside amplified by the silence within. Rachel woke with a start at 2 a.m., the sensation of being watched gripping her. From her bed, she saw a figure standing by the window. She screamed, waking everyone, but when the lights came on, there was no one there. The group spent the next day in a haze of paranoia. Every shadow felt like a threat, every rustle a warning. They decided to leave early the next morning. That night, the terror escalated. While Emma was packing, she heard a faint scratching at the door. "Mike?" she called, but there was no answer. As she approached the door, the scratching turned to pounding. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The door flew open, but no one was there. Only the totem from the basement lay on the doorstep, its hollow eyes staring up at her. Chris and Rachel were already panicking. "We need to leave, now," Rachel insisted. Mike agreed, but when they tried to start the car, the engine sputtered and died. "We'll wait it out till morning," Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. At 3 a.m., the cabin was plunged into darkness. The generator had failed. Flashlights flickered as the group huddled together. That's when they heard it, a deep guttural growl from the woods, followed by footsteps circling the cabin. The door rattled violently. Something or someone was trying to get in. Mike grabbed a kitchen knife while Emma frantically whispered for everyone to stay quiet. Suddenly, the window shattered, and a pale, clawed hand reached inside. The group screamed, scattering as chaos erupted. When dawn finally broke, the woods were eerily still. A search party found the cabin days later, abandoned. The police report mentioned signs of a struggle, but no bodies were ever recovered. Local legends speak of the cabin as cursed, a place where the woods themselves come alive to claim intruders. To this day, hikers in Vermont report strange carvings near the tree line and the feeling of being watched. Part 2. It was summer 2018 when three close friends decided to escape their everyday routines. Amelia, Logan, and Ethan had planned a camping trip to Black Hollow Forest, a dense and secluded woodland in Oregon. The idea was simple: disconnect from the digital world and spend 3 nights surrounded by nature. The forest had its charm. Towering pines stretched endlessly into the sky, their dense canopy blocking most of the sunlight. Streams trickled through the underbrush, and the air carried the scent of fresh pine needles. But Black Hollow had a reputation, a place where campers often felt like they weren't alone. Locals spoke of strange disappearances, but the trio laughed it off as old folklore. Their first evening began with laughter around the fire, the warmth of the flames pushing back the growing chill. But as night deepened, the forest seemed to grow darker than it should. The group felt the oppressive silence. Unbeknownst to them, the woods were already watching. Amelia was the group's adventurer. A wildlife photographer in her late 20s, she had a knack for finding beauty in the most unexpected places. She was the one who suggested Black Hollow, drawn by rumors of its untouched beauty, and perhaps its haunting tales. Logan, Amelia's childhood friend, was a skeptic. As a data analyst, he believed in logic and facts. Ghost stories and legends, he dismissed them as distractions for bored minds, but he joined the trip to support Amelia and enjoy a break from his screen-heavy life. Ethan was the wild card. The youngest of the three, his carefree and easygoing nature often got him into trouble. A bartender with a love for thrill-seeking, Ethan saw the trip as a chance for adventure and maybe to impress Amelia, though he'd never admit it. The first night passed peacefully. They set up tents near a clearing, the fire crackling softly under the starlit sky. Logan joked about the forest's eerie reputation, but Amelia hushed him, pretending to hear something. It was a game at first, until Ethan's face paled. "I wasn't joking," Ethan whispered. "I thought I heard footsteps." They dismissed it as an animal and went to bed. None of them noticed the faint humanoid shadow that lingered just beyond the firelight. The next morning began with Ethan discovering his flashlight was missing. "I left it right here," he grumbled, searching around the camp. Amelia found it strange but didn't comment. Logan laughed, calling Ethan careless. The group decided to hike deeper into the forest. Amelia carried her camera, hoping to capture the perfect shot. The air was thick with humidity, and the only sounds were the crunch of their boots on leaves and the occasional bird call. But halfway through their hike, they noticed something odd, a pile of stacked stones in the middle of the trail. "Who would do that out here?" Amelia asked, snapping a photo. "Probably someone marking a trail," Logan replied, though even he sounded unsure. The rest of the day passed without incident, but as they sat around the fire that evening, the unease returned. There were no crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, they heard it, a low guttural growl. Ethan stood up, scanning the darkness. "That's not normal," he muttered, gripping his camping knife. "Probably a bear," Logan suggested, though his voice wavered. Amelia said nothing, staring into the black void beyond the firelight. They didn't sleep well that night. By the third day, the forest no longer felt inviting. It felt hostile. The trees seemed closer, the air heavier. Ethan found another strange sign, branches woven together into a crude figure, hanging from a tree near their camp. This time, no one laughed. "We need to leave," Amelia said firmly. Logan hesitated. "We've got one more night. Let's not overreact." Ethan sided with Amelia. "Man, this isn't normal. Something's out here." Reluctantly, they stayed. That night, they fortified their camp, keeping a roaring fire alive. The growl came again, closer this time. Then came the snapping of branches, deliberate and slow, circling the camp. Ethan, unable to take the tension, grabbed his flashlight and scanned the woods. "Show yourself," he yelled. The beam caught something, a pale, emaciated figure with hollow eyes staring back. It moved unnaturally, jerking its head like a predator sizing up its prey. Ethan stumbled back, his scream cutting through the night. Chaos erupted. The figure darted out of sight, but the sounds didn't stop. Sticks snapped. Footsteps thudded. Amelia and Logan scrambled to pack essentials while Ethan stood guard. "Run for the car," Amelia shouted. They bolted, leaving the camp behind. The forest seemed alive, branches clawing at them as they ran. The figure appeared again, this time blocking their path. Its gaunt face twisted into a grotesque smile. Logan threw a rock, yelling for the others to keep running. They reached the car, panting and terrified. Ethan fumbled with the keys, finally getting the engine to roar to life. As they sped away, Amelia looked back. The figure stood at the tree line, watching them, its hollow eyes glowing faintly in the headlights. The trio didn't stop driving until dawn broke. They reported the incident to the local authorities, who dismissed it as hysteria. "There are no predators like that in Black Hollow," an officer assured them. But Amelia knew better. Reviewing her photos, she found one she didn't remember taking, a blurred figure standing among the trees, watching them as they set up camp. To this day, none of them have returned to the forest. Black Hollow remains a mystery, its shadows hiding secrets no one dares to uncover. Part 3. The year was 2016. In a quiet industrial district just outside of Chicago, there stood an abandoned warehouse. Its towering, rusted walls loomed like a forgotten giant, casting long shadows under the flickering streetlights. Local legends called it the Whispering Warehouse. People claimed to hear voices inside, low, unintelligible murmurs, like a conversation held just out of reach. 3 friends, Sophie, Mark, and Ben, had heard these stories countless times. To them, it was just a spooky tale, perfect for a laugh on Halloween nights. But curiosity has a way of unraveling even the most skeptical minds. On a chilly October evening, they decided to explore the warehouse themselves, armed with nothing but flashlights in their bravado. As they approached the towering structure, the air grew colder, unnaturally so. Sophie shivered but laughed it off. "It's just the wind," she muttered. None of them realized they were walking into a trap, a place that wanted them to stay. Sophie was the brave one, or at least she pretended to be. A journalism student in her final year, she had a knack for diving headfirst into the unknown. For her, this was a chance to uncover the truth behind the whispers and maybe write an article that would finally get noticed. Mark, Sophie's childhood friend, was the planner. An engineering graduate, he relied on logic and preparation. His analytical mind often clashed with Sophie's impulsive nature, but their friendship balanced out their differences. He wasn't thrilled about breaking into an old warehouse, but didn't want to leave Sophie and Ben alone. Ben was the wild card, a self-proclaimed thrill seeker with a fascination for the paranormal. He was the one who pushed for the adventure. "What's life without a little adrenaline?" he often said. But deep down, Ben wasn't fearless. He was just good at hiding it. The trio climbed through a gap in the chain-link fence. The warehouse door creaked as they pushed it open, the sound echoing into the vast empty space. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of rust and decay. "Stick together," Mark said, his voice firm. Sophie nodded, gripping her flashlight tightly. The first hour inside the warehouse felt uneventful. Dust-covered crates and rusting machinery filled the cavernous space. Ben joked about ghosts, his laughter bouncing off the walls. "See? Nothing here but junk." But then Sophie heard it, a faint whisper. She froze, signaling the others to stop. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mark shook his head. "Hear what?" Ben leaned closer. "She's messing with us." The whisper came again, louder this time. It was neither male nor female, but an eerie mix of both, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Leave. Now." "Okay, that's creepy," Ben admitted, his cocky grin fading. Mark scanned the area with his flashlight. "It's probably just the wind through the vents," he reasoned, though his voice lacked conviction. They pressed on, each step heavier than the last. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of their vision, but every time they turned, there was nothing there. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, they found a staircase leading to the basement. The air grew colder with each step. Sophie's flashlight flickered, then went out. "No, no, no," she muttered, smacking it against her palm. "Here, use mine," Ben offered, though his own light seemed dimmer now. The basement was worse than they'd imagined. The walls were lined with graffiti, symbols none of them recognized. In the center of the room was a circle of candles, long extinguished, their wax pooled on the concrete floor. "This is definitely not normal," Mark said, backing away. Sophie crouched to examine the circle. "These symbols, they're ritualistic." Ben shifted uncomfortably. "Rituals for what?" Before Sophie could answer, the whispers returned, louder, angrier. The air grew thick, almost suffocating. Then came the sound of footsteps above them, slow and deliberate. "Someone's here," Mark whispered, his face pale. They turned off their flashlights and crouched in the shadows, their breaths shallow. The footsteps descended the stairs, each one sending a jolt of terror through their bodies. But when the figure finally came into view, there was no one there, only the sound of footsteps continuing past them. Panic set in. Ben bolted for the stairs. "We're leaving, now." The others followed, but the warehouse seemed to shift around them. Hallways that led to the exit before now stretched endlessly, turning back on themselves. The whispers grew deafening, drowning out their frantic shouts. And then they saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the hall. Its shape was human, but its movements were unnatural, jerking and twisting as if it didn't belong in this world. "Run!" Sophie screamed. They sprinted down the corridor, the figure gliding behind them. Ben tripped, his flashlight clattering to the ground. Sophie and Mark pulled him up, the shadow now mere feet away. They burst through a side door, collapsing onto the pavement outside. The warehouse loomed behind them, silent once more, but when they looked back, the shadow was in the window watching. The trio never spoke of that night again. Sophie deleted her photos, and Ben burned the notebook he'd used to record their findings. Mark spent weeks researching the warehouse's history, but found nothing concrete, only rumors of strange rituals and unexplained disappearances. The warehouse still stands, its whispers waiting for the next group of curious souls. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a paranormal experience or where you'd like our next story to take place. Until next time, stay safe and sleep well.